Hello and welcome to class. My name is Chef Toni Lynn Dickinson, and today we're going to make sugar paste lilies. So we have to look at our lilies. Let's think about our lilies. They've got leaves, and then they've got a center, and they've got little stamens or anthers as they're called off the center. So what we first have to do is start with our center. So I have some sugar paste that I've already massaged, and whenever you have your sugar paste, you always want to warm it up. You want to press with your hands, and some of that heat from your body is going to warm the gums in it and make it pliable. So here I'm going to take just a small little pea size of sugar paste, probably just very, very little, like this, to make what's called the anthers. So I need to have my wire, and whenever you're using your sugar paste, always make sure that you have a damp cloth and some plastic cover it to keep it from drying out. So I'm just going to shape this into just a little bit of a oval, like a pill shape. I have my wire here. I'm going to dip it into some glue. I'm going to take my pliers and bend a small hook there, and then hook that, so you can see, right in. So the hook goes in first and then over. I'll pinch that right around the edge. I'm not too concerned about whether or not I see a little bit of that wire. It's not my concern. I just want to make sure it's nice and well tapered on the bottom. It looks just like that. And once that's done, I'm going to bend it and hang it up and let it dry. I have to do that 6 times. So for our lily, we have to have a center. And so for this, we're going to create a long centered stem. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to bend this tip over. And we've done this before in other flowers with the lily of the valley to make sure that we are able to hold on to it. And we're going to put just a little bit of CMC glue on there, and I want to work the glue a little bit down, just that little drop, and then work it down onto the wire that has paper or cloth, and just make it moist enough so it will be able to accept the sugar paste, and the sugar paste will cling to it. I'm going to take a little sugar paste, make sure it's nice and warm, as I do with anything, and then I'm going to hook it on, and you're going to probably take off more than you're going to put on. So I'll put a little bit of Crisco or shortening on my fingers to make sure that it rolls a little faster, and bring it all the way down. And I'm probably going to take some of this sugar paste off. So I can use my hands, and I can actually roll it on my station just like this to get a nice even roll. So you're pressing it downward. Works much faster than just your hands, and you can actually get a nice thin coating. And I only need it to be about 2 inches long, so whatever comes off on the end is too far on the bottom, I'll just cut that off. So right here I want to leave some of that sugar paste as a knob at the end, just as like a little bulb, and make it a little narrow. And once I have it to the thinness that I desire, and you can look at your lilies and see that the centers are not as thick as most people think. Sometimes I see people making flowers and they make this very, very thick center. They're not thick at all. You need them to be fairly thin. Then once I have that on, I'm going to make sure that my bulb is in the center of my hook is in the center of that bulb, and then I'm going to take my tweezers. I want it just a little smaller there, so I'll work that down just a little smaller. I'm going to take my tweezers, I'll cut off what I don't need at the bottom here, and pull that sugar paste and save it, because remember, you can use that sugar paste again. And you can make this center white and then dust it green, or you can start off with green sugar paste. So once that's done, I'm going to create a little round tip to it right there. And then I'm going to take these tweezers, and just like we did with the tulip, we're going to make a Y shape. So from the top, I'll take my tweezers and I'll pinch again, and then pinch a third time. And there is my center. Once that's done, and I can make as many as I want, I'm going to take it, hang it up, and then let it dry. So I do that in assembly line. Whenever you're going to make your flowers, you always want to make all of your centers, then all of your anthers, and then we're going to move on to the leaves. So for the leaves are wired leaves. So I have made some orange sugar paste I'm going to use. Okay, so again, you have to take your sugar paste and you have to warm it up. And we did this when we made the tulips. We also used wired centers, or wired petals rather. So I'm going to warm this up. We have our groove board, and our groove board has all these grooves that we're going to be able to use and that we need, because this is going to give us the texture of the veining for our petals. So I'll make sure that it's nice and clean. I don't want to have any kind of dirt or anything on there. So you have a damp towel and then a dry towel to wipe right behind, because if your board is wet, then your sugar paste is going to stick. You can take a little bit of cornstarch and just brush it across the sides and make sure that it's nice and clean. Brush out any excess in there. You don't need that to be built up in your petals. And now I'm going to roll it. So I'll take a piece of sugar paste that's been warmed up, and I'm only going to be able to get a couple of leaves done at one time. I'm only going to be able to get a couple of petals done at one time. So I'll lay that right on the center. I've got my rolling pin, and you can see this is an acrylic rolling pin, but as I've said before, you can also use a PVC pipe. It works just as well, and it's less expensive. So I'm going to roll across, and now I'm going to roll the sugar paste down, up, and then down. And I want to roll it down as far as I can get it. The lilies have 6 petals, and of the 6 petals, you have 3 larger ones and 3 smaller ones. So although I want the veining, I don't want too much of that thick veining to show. And I want them to be fairly thin so that they can have a realistic look to them. So once you've rolled that out, you're then going to take either a spatula or a knife, pick up your sugar paste very gently, and there you can see where the veins are. So I will turn this over because my board has 2 sides to it. And I'm going to take my cutters, and these are the larger leaves. Those are on the outside, and then they're the smaller leaves. So I'll take this, line it up with my veins, and I want it as close to the top as possible. I'll press down, give it a little wiggle action to make sure I've cut through, and then pull my sugar paste away from the cutter to make sure that I have a nice clean line. So right there, you can see there's the vein, okay? So once that vein is established, and I may have to roll this again. Oh, maybe I can get one more out of here, and maybe it'll be a thinner one. Nope, maybe one more. Let's see. See if I can get a thinner one out of this one. It's a little too short, so I'll have to roll it again. Not a problem. Just take your sugar paste, put it in a ball, put it to the side. So right here, I'm going to take another wire, and this is about a number 26, so it has some flexibility. I don't need a hook on this one. This I just want to thread right into my petal. So again, a little sugar paste, work it down onto the wire so that the paper gets dampened. Dry your fingers. And then right here, you're going to wiggle it. You're going to thread it right in. You want to keep it as close as possible to the top part where you're looking. You don't want it to show on the other side. So I'm just doing a back and forth motion, a little back and forth motion, and pushing it forward. You can put your hand on either side of the vein so that you can control where it goes. And you want to go about halfway up. Right there. So you can see it has a little bit of a flop there. Now that I've got that, now I need to thin the edges out just so that they have a little bit more realism. So I'm going to use a ball tool. This time I'm using a plastic ball tool. You can find them. They're a little less expensive. Just be aware that when you're purchasing plastic ones, make sure that it doesn't have a high seam. Because if you have a high seam, then when you go to use it, it's going to tear up your sugar paste. If it does, take a little bit of sandpaper, sand that down, and then smooth it as much as possible so it doesn't have any effect on your sugar paste. So right here we're going to use our ball tool half on, half off of our petal, okay, all the way down to the bottom. And you can give it a little bit of ruffling, and I think I spoke about ruffling before when we were making the tulips, that your ruffling action is going to be a little bit of a back and forth motion, just like that. If you just want something smooth, go in one direction. If you want a little ruffling, go back and forth just a little bit. So now that I have it as smooth as I want or as thin as I want, I'm now going to use my veiner to give it some texture. This is really important in making any of your flowers. We don't realize how much texture there are on flowers, but we do, and it's necessary to do so, so when we go to dust them, it picks up those little bits of color that we add, and that's what gives it depth. So right here, I think I'm going to use this larger one because this is a fairly large petal. Right here, you can see the veiner has those straight lines, and then I'm going to press with a fair amount of pressure, and there, our petal is made. Now all I need to do is have it shaped. Now what you can do is you can just take it and bend it forth like this. So we're going to put it in a little bit of foil. I've prepared it already, and that's just taking some foil, regular old foil, folding it until you have a nice V shape like this. You can set it up right on top of your wire here, your wire rack so it holds. Take your petal, bend it slightly, and then just lay it inside and allow it to dry. And depending on how much fold you want in your petal, depends on how much pressure you put on the foil itself. So, 2 more petals to go for the larger set. Again, we're going to massage our sugar paste. Take our groove board, make a sausage with our sugar paste, lay it across the top, take our rolling pin, go across the surface, and then stretch it downward. And it's amazing how much you can get out of a little piece of sugar paste. It stretches so much. With all of those gums, it has a lot of stretch to it. And don't be afraid about going thin on it. I think that's part of the beauty of the flowers looking realistic, because whenever you look at petals, they're really not thick at all. If you see some bad sugar paste flowers, you'll see that they're kind of clunky. So we want ours to be as realistic as possible. And it comes with practice. So the first time you make them, they might be a little bit thicker because you're not used to using the sugar paste. And as time goes on, you'll get better and better at it. My main concern here is making sure that I have enough space for the length of my petal. So I'll measure that and see if I can get 1 or 2 out of there. So I'll move this down just a little bit more. And sometimes you may only get 1 or 2 out of the whole process. That's just part of the way it goes. Use your edges, go underneath your edges and pull it up. And you can also put a little bit of corn starch or a little bit of Crisco underneath to make it remove a little bit easier. So right there I've got a nice piece. Turn my board over again, pick up my cutters, see what I can get out of it, and I want to go as high to the top of the line as possible. I don't want to be too much down at the thicker end. Some of that will be worked out. Again, pull my sugar paste away from my cutter to try and get a nice clean cut. That's one. I'm going to get a second one out of here, which means by getting the second one, I've got my first 3 petals done. Pull my sugar paste again. 2. I'm lucky enough, I might be able to actually get all 3 cutters out of this, so good. All 6 of my petals. Again, as high up away from the vein line, press down, a little wiggle action, pull the sugar away, nice clean cut. 2. Again, and now the third and last of the smaller petals. Boy, I feel accomplished. Okay, there we go. Right there. Now that I've pulled or cut all of these, I need to keep them moist. So I have a plastic bag over here. Now right here, there's a little bit of I didn't cut it quite cleanly, so I'm just going to take my knife and go right against there and take that out. Good. So I have a plastic bag, and I'm going to keep my sugar paste pieces, the ones I'm not working on, I want to keep them moist, because sugar, when exposed to the air, after it's been mixed, begins to dry when it has these drying elements in it. And when you go to work at the sugar paste, if it's been exposed to the air too much, it cracks. So I'm going to put them in a plastic bag and cover it with a damp towel. And that way I know when I go to work with these again, they'll be ready for me to go. So I'm finished with my cutters, but the most important thing is after you finish with your cutters, make sure that you take a damp towel, wipe them down, because there is a little sugar that sticks to them, and if that sugar stays on the cutters, when you go to use them again, it will tear up the sugar paste and you will not get a clean cut. So wipe them down with a damp towel and then wipe them again with a dry towel. And you can put them right away. And if you make this a habit, your tools and your equipment will stay in good shape. So now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on our petal. So I've got to put my wire in. So I will have my wire again. Again, no hook, a little bit of glue. And I think I spoke to you about glue before, but how did I make this glue? I just took a little bit of my sugar paste, boiled it with some water, and now I have glue. I don't have to go out and make or buy a special glue. I can just use whatever sugar paste I have. Okay, again, we're going to wiggle this right underneath, get it right inside. We're going to go about halfway up. Once we're there, thin out the sides. If I feel like it's pulling on me a little bit, put a little bit of Crisco shortening on the edge. Give it a little bit of a wiggle so it has a little ruffling to it. You want to work fairly quickly. Have my press, place it down, press it with firmness. There's my petal. Shape it, place it right inside, and as you can see, I can place one right inside the other. I don't have to worry about having a separate folded foil for each. They can all just lay one on top of the other. Okay? So now I'm going to do that for all 6 of my petals. Now in this one, I see I have a little bit of a frayed edge. So I'm just going to take my scissors and take some of that fray away. It looks small now, but when I go to press it with the ball tool, it actually can become more exaggerated. And if your ball tool is sticking, it may mean that there's sugar paste on it. You can put a little, clean it off with your damp towel, dry it, and then we're ready to go. Okay. So going back to our order here, we're putting our wire right inside, wiggle it, wiggle, 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 all the way up, about halfway up. I'm happy with that. Look on the inside. Oh, it popped through a little bit. I'm just going to press my hand across that and smooth it through. Take it, thin my edges, give it a little wiggle so it has a little bit of a ruffle there. Ruffle it back and forth. Press it. Doesn't matter if you have the pedal upside down or right side up, or when you go to press it, it's still going to work the same way. There you go. And then again, a little bit of a bend, and place that right inside. So that's my first 3, and now I'll do the smaller. And I'm not worried about the whole petal, remember, just the edges, because that's what the eye is going to see. The human eye has a nice ability to ignore a lot of things, but if it looks thin on the edge, they just think the whole thing is thin. And the thinner your petal is, the lighter your flower is going to be. So just a little ruffling just along the edge. And one other thing sometimes people fail to do is when you get down here, put a little pressure where the base of the petal is, because sometimes that will get in the way when you go to assemble. Place it back down. Now I'm going to vein it on the other side because it's a little bit smaller, and it will give a little bit of a different sizing to the veining compared to the larger ones. And then again, bend it. So with your lilies, that's your basic thing. So I've made my centers, I've made my anthers, and I have made my petals. Now I'm going to leave all of those elements to dry overnight. And here are my anthers already made. So how do I get that texture for those anthers? I'm going to take that center that I made earlier, that looks just like a little pill drop here. I'm going to put just a little bit of sugar paste on the outside, not a lot, because too much sugar paste will help to dissolve the sugar. I'm going to take a little bit of glue and put it on the outside of my anther. Not too much, because too much of the glue will dissolve the sugar paste. And then I'm going to take a spice. And you can use, this is nutmeg, you could use paprika if you wanted it to be more red. You could use cayenne pepper. That's a little hot, but you can do that. And then you just roll it right within the glue. I need a little bit more here. And have it attach. And that gives you that pollened look to your anthers. I'll leave that to dry. Hang it and let it dry. So once those are done and they dry, now I'm ready to put my flower together. So I have a pre-made center here, and you can see it has that nice Y shape to the center of it. And as with all flowers, I have to make sure that I tape my wires. I don't want to see them. So I'm going to take some floral tape, and you can pick whichever color you want. I don't need a lot. I just need a little bit to start. So right at the base of my center, I'm going to take my floral tape. I'll bend it as we did with both the tulips and the lilies of the valley. We're going to start with it just a little bit on an angle, and then we're going to stretch it with one hand and turn with the other so that we cover the wire. And I don't need to cover the whole wire just yet, just about that much, because it's just for the assembly. tear that off, and hold that to the side. I have to do that also for all of my petals. Just a little bit of tape, and I'm going to start on the edge. I'll start a little further down, turn it, and then push it up so it comes to the base of my flower. And I don't have to worry about handling my flower too close to the edge and then breaking it. And then from there, just a couple of twists, oops, and tear that off. So I had a little bit of a pulled there, so I'm going to cut this off because I don't want to have a big bulky section there. So I'll cut that off. And now I'm going to do that for all of my petals. So you can get this tape at your florist. You could probably find it also at a art supply store or a craft store. Start lower, push it up to the base of my petal. Again, hold my finger underneath, stretch it on an angle so I get the maximum coverage with minimum tape. And then I'm going to clip this one because I had a little bad experience with that last time. So you'll find, and this may be the case for me here, that the tape can begin to dry out. So don't buy a lot of it. Don't buy, a whole case of it and think you're going to hold it for however many years and get through with it. It will begin to dry out. So buy what you know you can use within a year or two. Start below, push it up to the edge, all the way to the base. A little twist, stretch your finger, so I have 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do the last 3 on the edge. Start below, push upward to the base of my petal. Just about a quarter way down. Cut. I'm ready for the next one. I'm almost there. Push it all the way up. Quarter of the way down and cut. So I'm picking a little bit of a lighter green. They have the floral tape comes in this light green, it comes in a darker green, and it comes in an even lighter green. So it's up to you, whichever one you want to use. I think that the human eye just wants to register that there's some green there. With roses, I like to use the dark green because roses do have a dark stem. But whatever you're going to use, just be consistent with the flowers throughout. So there, I have my petals done. Now we're going to assemble the whole thing. So here's my center, and I'm not going to put any tape on my anthers. I don't want them to stand out. I want them to be very, very delicate. So I have to put them with my center, but I want to make sure that they line up where they're just a little bit above. So when I bend them, using my pliers here, they just sit almost equal to it because I'm going to pull them out just a little bit like that. All right? So I'm going to start with some tape. And I'll give myself a decent piece because I've got to wrap all 6 of these around. Well, 5 of them, I'm sorry, 5. So I want to start with just a little bit of tape there. I don't want to be too big, so I'm going to take all of my anthers, and I will keep them measured straight upward so I can measure them all to be the same height. And I'm going to place them around my center. There's one. Give it just a little bit of a twist. Set up the third. And the fourth. And the fifth. So I want to set them around my center, and I want to make sure that they're all the same height. You may have to use your pliers to straighten everything out. Don't get too crazy about it. You'll be able to adjust it afterwards. So we have the 5 anthers there. And now I'm going to tape them all the way around, adjusting them as I go. Try and make sure that the center is in the center of the anthers. And there we have them. And now I'm going to take that tape and I'm going to run it down to make sure that they are stable. Just like that. Cut my tape off. Now we're ready to put the petals around it. So before I go there, I'm going to take my pliers and just bend my anthers over just a little bit. So they're sitting away from the center. And then I can adjust them. Once done, I'm going to start with my larger petals first. And they've already been taped. So, with my tiger lilies, or with any lilies, they all have a little different marking. So I can either choose to mark them now or mark them after the flowers put together. To save some time, I've already put a little bit of yellow right in the center of my flowers. And you can see that yellow and a little bit of yellow and that other orange dusting helps to pull out the veining on every single one of them. So what I can do is I can put a little bit of dots on them to start. So I'm going to take a little bit of grain alcohol, and I need a dark colored dye, and I have something here that, let's see how it looks. We need just a little bit of dye, alcohol. What's going to happen is the alcohol is going to cause the dye to dry very quickly. So all I have to do is just put a dot here and there on my petals. If you look at tiger lilies, you'll see that they have some dots on them. And you can be very random about it. You can see I don't need a lot of color. I've only dipped it once, but it's providing all the color I need for practically all of my petals. And they're all done, just like that, one little dip. Now we're going to put them to the side together. So I'm going to look at my petals and see where my larger petals are and put those together to one side. and my smaller petals on the other. So my larger petals are going to go on first, and just like we made a Y for the center of it, we want to think of that same Y or 3 parts when we're putting this on. It's a similar thing that we did when we made the tulips as well. So I'm going to bend my petal back just a little bit so I can bring it right to the base where I want it to be, which is right here, okay? And that way I can align it a little bit better to make sure it's lined up as much as possible. And now we begin the taping process. So I'm going to start off with one tape. I'm going to bring it as close as I possibly can to the top and tape it snugly. And just one loop. That's it, just one loop. Then the next petal comes over, and we're going to bend that back just a little bit. And there's our second one. And again, one loop with the tape, just one. So if it works its way over, sometimes it will, take your time with it. So take our time, we have our second one set up, and now my third one goes in. Bend the head back a little bit. So now we have that Y or that peace sign, whichever suits your fancy. And I'm going to make sure that I have it pulled down well. This, I'm going to pull this down just by looking where my wire is, and I'm going to pull my petal down so it's close to the base as I possibly can get it. You don't want to see a large gap between the wired petal and the base. So now that I have those first 3 done, now I can set up my next 3, and they're going to go in between. So they're very fragile. Be careful with them as much as possible. And a lot of times when you're making flowers like this, you're going to want to have extra petals, just in case something happens. So there's 1, 2, 3. That's my second set going here. I'll bend my head back just a little bit so I have a little play. Here's the third one. Put it right in the middle. And bend it back just slightly. Get myself attached here. Third one goes in. I'm going to wrap this around as tight as I possibly can. And once I have that established, I'm now going to begin to bring my tape all the way down over all of my wires. And it's thick, but that's okay because the stem of a lily is thick. And as you're doing this, you'll be tempted sometimes to spin really quickly. Take your time, because if the petals hit against each other, they can crack and break. You will have gone through all that work and have to start all over. So you'll make it as far as you need it to be, and if it's going to be going into a cake, you want to make sure that all of the wire is covered. Nothing is exposed. So there we have our 6 petals, and we're going to use our pliers and very gently adjust our petals. So we want to see the larger 3 on the inside, and be very careful. And this is where it's important to make sure that you have your wires deep in your petal, halfway in, because if they're not all the way in, when you go to adjust them, they will begin to break. So carefully work them, 3 out, 3 in. I hope you've enjoyed learning about tiger lilies, and I'll see you next class.